A $40 betrayal. They say blood is thicker than water. But what happens when the very blood you gave life to turns its back on you? For $40? I still remember the sting in my chest, sharper than any winter wind. My own daughter, the child I had carried, clothed, and defended through every storm of her life, looked me in the eye through a glowing phone screen and said, "You're on your own, Mom. Don't call me for money again." It wasn't a fortune I had asked for. It wasn't inheritance papers or property deeds. It was $40. $40 for groceries and medicine after weeks of juggling bills and stretching soup for both me and the grandson she had left behind. $40. Denied by the very person I had once skipped meals for just to make sure she never went hungry. Before we go deeper into today's dramatic family tale, don't forget to subscribe to Quiet Revenge Tales and hit that notification bell. Here, you'll always find stories of sacrifice, betrayal, and those unforgettable moments when the tables turn. And tell me, where are you watching from? Leave a comment below. Who knows, the next story might remind you of something from your own life. Now, let me take you back. Setting the stage. A life of quiet sacrifice. My name is Eleanor. I am 65 years old, widowed for more than a decade, and a grandmother raising a boy who never asked to be abandoned. His name is Jacob, a quiet, thoughtful child with his father's dark eyes and my stubborn jawline. His mother, my daughter Caroline, left for Europe 2 years ago, chasing a relationship that promised adventure and money. She said it was temporary. She promised she would send for Jacob when she was settled. She never did. At first, I believed her. I told Jacob every bedtime that his mother was busy, that she loved him, that one day she'd come back. But weeks turned to months and her calls became fewer, shorter, colder. Then, eventually, they stopped coming altogether, except for the rare moments she needed something from me. Do you know what it feels like to raise a child twice in one lifetime? Once as a mother, once again as a grandmother? It is both a blessing and a curse. My body is older, my patience sometimes thinner, but my love for Jacob is fierce. He became my second chance at meaning. But love doesn't pay the bills, and my pension, small as it was, barely covered rent and utilities. Food prices climbed, school supplies were endless. And one winter evening, after counting coins at the bottom of my purse, I swallowed my pride and called Caroline. I asked for $40. Just 40. Enough for medicine for Jacob's cough and a bag of groceries. She laughed. She actually laughed before saying those words that cut deeper than any blade. "You're on your own, Mom." Tell me, if you were in my place, what would you have felt in that moment? The seed of word betrayal, it wasn't the money. It was never just the money. It was the reminder that all my sacrifices, every hour at the sewing machine, every sleepless night, every unpaid bill when she was young, meant nothing to her now. Caroline had not only abandoned her son, she had abandoned me too. And betrayal, dear listener, rarely comes all at once. It trickles in. It comes in ignored phone calls, in harsh words, in birthdays forgotten. Jacob's birthday that year was the first time he asked me directly, "Grandma, why doesn't Mom love me anymore?" I had no answer. My heart broke twice, once for myself, once for him. Neighbors started noticing. They'd slip by with casseroles, hand-me-down clothes for Jacob, even $20 bills folded into envelopes. Their kindness was a mirror that made Caroline's absence shine all the crueler. And then came the moment that changed everything. A letter, misaddressed, left at my door. It was from Caroline, meant for someone else, a landlord overseas. She wasn't struggling as I had imagined. She was thriving, living with a wealthy partner, spending freely on trips and luxuries. In her words, she even bragged, "It feels so good to finally live for myself without being chained to family." Those words set my blood on fire. Have you ever discovered a truth that rewrites every memory? That letter did that for me. A whisper of justice. From that day, something shifted in me. I still cooked, still cared for Jacob, still sewed late into the night for extra dollars. But beneath the routine, I began to plan. I started documenting every letter, every message, every school form that showed my name as Jacob's guardian. I spoke to a retired lawyer at church who explained that by law, abandonment is no small matter. "You've done more than raise that boy," she said, her voice firm. "You've established custody through care. If Caroline ever tries to return and take him, you have a case stronger than hers." For the first time in years, I felt something stir in my chest. Strength. I didn't tell Caroline. I didn't confront her. Sometimes, silence is the sharpest weapon. Instead, I held my head high and prepared for the day she would regret every cruel word. Because in family, betrayal cuts deep, but justice, when it comes, can heal wounds you didn't think could close. And so, dear listener, as we step into the heart of this tale, remember this. Betrayal often begins with something small, a forgotten birthday, a denied $40, but left unchecked, it grows into something that can poison generations. What would you have done in my place? Would you have begged again, or turned your back once and for all? The weight of silence. A house of shadows. Life in my small apartment carried on with quiet determination. The peeling wallpaper, the uneven hum of the refrigerator, the secondhand couch sagging in the middle. It all spoke of a life stretched thin but held together. Jacob filled the space with the sounds of his pencils scratching across homework, the soft thud of soccer balls against the wall, and the laughter he tried so hard to keep alive despite the empty space his mother left behind. But silence has a way of weighing heavier than noise. Every time the phone buzzed, Jacob's eyes lit up, only to fall when the call wasn't from Caroline. Every unopened envelope with her handwriting felt like a ghost hovering in the room. Neighbors whispered that Caroline had moved on, and sometimes those whispers reached Jacob. Children at school asked him why his mom never came to pick him up. I patched every wound with hugs and bedtime stories, but even grandmothers have limits to their healing powers. Words that bruise deeper than hands. Caroline did call again, once, months later. Her voice was sharp, impatient, like I was interrupting something important. "Why do you keep guilt-tripping me, Mom?" she snapped. "I told you, I needed to live my life." "You've always been so dramatic, making me feel like I owe you for everything." "I don't. You chose to raise me. That was your job." I remember my fingers trembling on the receiver. My throat was dry. How could a daughter forget so quickly the meals skipped, the debts unpaid, the sleepless nights? "You left your son, Caroline," I whispered. "Doesn't he deserve—" She cut me off. "Don't start with the guilt, Mom." "He'll be fine. You've got nothing better to do anyway. If you've ever been told you're nothing, you'll understand the hollow that opened in my chest that night. Tell me, have you ever heard words from your own child that cut you deeper than any enemy's insult?" The strain of sacrifice. The bills piled higher. My sewing machine rattled through the evenings, stitching dresses and curtains for neighbors. My hands grew stiff. My back ached. But Jacob's smile at the dinner table was the reward I clung to. There were nights when I made do with tea and bread so he could have a proper meal. He never complained, but I caught him once slipping half his sandwich back onto my plate. That was the kind of boy he was, already carrying burdens far heavier than his years. And all the while, Caroline lived her glossy life in Europe. Social media told the stories she never confessed to me. Champagne glasses, luxury handbags, weekend trips to Paris. Every photo was another slap in the face. Not because I envied her, but because it showed me she had the means to send something, anything for Jacob, yet she chose not to. The whispering doubt. At church, whispers grew louder. A woman I barely knew leaned over one Sunday and asked, "So, is your daughter ever coming back for him?" Her tone was laced with pity that burned hotter than scorn. I smiled weakly, deflecting. But inside, the doubt gnawed. What if Caroline one day decided she wanted Jacob back, not out of love, but out of guilt or image? Could she just swoop in and tear him from the only stability he had left? That fear kept me awake more nights than hunger ever did. A gathering storm. The breaking point came at Thanksgiving. Families around the neighborhood gathered, filling homes with warmth and chatter. Jacob and I sat at our modest table, 2 plates of turkey I had stretched from a donated grocery box. Out of habit, Jacob called Caroline before we ate. For once, she answered. The sound of clinking glasses and laughter spilled through the phone. "Happy Thanksgiving, Mom," Jacob said, his voice hopeful, fragile. There was a pause. Then Caroline laughed, not at him, but at someone beside her. "Oh, honey, I'm busy." "Don't pout. Grandma will take care of you." "She always does." Jacob's face crumpled. He handed me the phone and bolted to his room. I pressed the receiver to my ear, fury boiling. "Caroline," I hissed, "do you even hear yourself?" She sighed as if I were an annoyance. "Stop being so dramatic." "Honestly, Mom, you sound jealous. Maybe if you hadn't been so bitter all your life, things would have been different for you." That was the night something inside me hardened. Confirming the truth. The next week, the retired lawyer from church, Mrs. Patterson, sat with me at the kitchen table. She explained in calm, firm words what I already suspected. Caroline had effectively abandoned Jacob, legally, emotionally, financially. "Keep your records," she advised. "Every expense, every school form with your name, every message. If she ever tries to reclaim him, the court will see the truth. You've been his real parent." I nodded, relief mingling with sorrow. My battle wasn't just with bills anymore. It was with the fear of losing the boy who had become my heart. A growing divide, Jacob grew older, wiser. He began to understand more than I wanted him to. One evening he asked, "Grandma, if Mom came back tomorrow and said she wanted me, would you let her take me?" I hesitated. "Sweetheart, you're not something to be passed around. You're loved. You belong where you're safe. But would you fight for me?" His eyes, so serious, pinned me in place. "Yes," I whispered, "with everything I have." And in that promise, a silent war began. The cliffhanger. The storm didn't take long to arrive. Months later, an envelope slid under my door. Official looking, heavy with seals and stamps. It was a letter from Caroline's lawyer. She was returning to claim Jacob, and with that, the battle lines were drawn. If you were me, what would you have done in that moment? Would you surrender, or would you prepare to fight for the child who had already been abandoned once? When silence breaks, the envelope that shattered peace. The letter trembled in my hands as though it carried a heartbeat of its own. Heavy parchment, a lawyer's crest embossed at the top, and my daughter's name written in bold, unforgiving ink. "Caroline Peterson," it read. My eyes darted across the words. Custody, visitation rights, best interests of the child. She was coming back. Not for me, not even for Jacob out of love, but because, according to the letter, her life circumstances had improved, and she was now in a position to reclaim her rightful role as mother. Rightful role? Where had that role been when Jacob had fevers at midnight, when he cried at school plays, searching the crowd for a face that never came? Where had she been when he whispered, "Why doesn't my mom love me?" I felt the bile rise in my throat, the audacity, the cruelty. Words could not contain it. Jacob's fragile hope. I didn't tell Jacob right away, but children have a way of sensing storms. He found the letter tucked beneath a stack of bills. His small fingers smoothed the paper, his eyes scanning words he barely understood. "Is Mom coming back?" he asked, his voice trembling between hope and fear. I hesitated, swallowing the knot in my throat. "She says she wants to see you." For a fleeting moment, his face lit up. But then, like a cloud passing over the sun, doubt returned. "But what if she just leaves again?" I pulled him close, whispering, "No matter what happens, you are not alone. I will never leave you," and in that embrace, I silently vowed I would not let her snatch him back like a forgotten toy suddenly remembered. Caroline's return. The day Caroline returned was colder than any winter morning. She arrived in a sleek black car, stepping out in designer boots, her hair glossy, her smile thin and rehearsed. She looked like a stranger, one who belonged to champagne bars and silk sheets, not the kitchen where I had once braided her hair before school. Her voice was honeyed, dripping with false sweetness. "Mother, you've done such a noble job. But Jacob needs stability. He needs me," I bit my tongue until it nearly bled. "Noble job? Stability?" I wanted to scream. Stability doesn't abandon a child for 2 years. Stability doesn't hang up on a cough-ridden boy asking for comfort. But I stayed silent. Sometimes silence is the blade, sharper than any word. The courtroom shadow. She dragged me into court, waving papers, speaking of opportunity, of her rights as a mother. Her lawyer painted her as a woman reborn, financially secure, emotionally ready, a mother reclaiming her lost child. And me? They called me old, tired, incapable of providing long-term care. They whispered words like burden, like outdated. I sat through it all, spine straight, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the judge. Every insult hurled at me was another stone I refused to let break my resolve, because I had something Caroline didn't. Proof. Words that wound, words that rally. Outside the courthouse, Caroline confronted me. Her words were knives meant to cut, to humiliate. "You're useless now, Mom. You've had your time. Step aside. He's my son." I stared into her cold eyes. "Then why did you abandon him? Why did you abandon me?" Her laugh was bitter, laced with disdain. "Because you've always been a chain around my neck. You suffocated me with your sacrifices, always playing the martyr. I won't let you do that to Jacob." Those words seared into my memory, and perhaps into Jacob's too, because he stood behind me, silent, hearing every syllable. Tell me, dear listener, what would you have done standing there? Would you have screamed back, or would you have let the silence show her ugliness louder than any reply? A child's choice. Days later, in a quiet corner of our small apartment, Jacob spoke. His voice was small, but his words carried the weight of a gavel. "I don't want to go with her, Grandma. I don't trust her. Please, don't let her take me." Tears welled in my eyes, but I held them back. "I promise," I said. "I will fight." And in that moment, his little hand gripping mine, I knew this was no longer just about betrayal. This was about justice. A revelation in the records. Mrs. Patterson, the retired lawyer from church, guided me through the files I had kept. School records with my signature, medical bills in my name, letters showing Caroline's absence, her refusal to provide support. "Do you realize what you have here?" Mrs. Patterson asked, eyes sharp. "This isn't just evidence, it's a story. A story of abandonment, neglect, and resilience. Judges don't just look at titles, they look at actions, and your actions scream louder than her polished words." For the first time in years, I felt hope pierce through the fog of despair. The boiling point. The custody hearing loomed like a storm cloud. Caroline walked in draped in silk, her lawyer armed with papers. She smiled at Jacob as though the past 2 years were a minor inconvenience, a forgotten vacation. But Jacob didn't smile back. His eyes darted to me, his grandmother, the one who had held his hand through every nightmare. When the judge asked Jacob if he had anything to say, my heart stopped. His small voice filled the room. "I want to stay with Grandma. She's the one who's been my mom." The silence that followed was heavier than any gavel strike. Caroline's painted smile cracked, just a hairline fracture, but enough for me to see the fury beneath. The cliffhanger. The judge leaned forward, his expression unreadable. Papers shuffled, pens scratched across notepads. And then he said, "The court will need to review all evidence before reaching a decision. In the meantime, custody remains with Mrs. Peterson." The relief was sharp, but it wasn't victory yet. As Caroline stormed out, her eyes locked on mine. "This isn't over," she hissed, and I believed her. Because betrayal rarely dies quietly. It claws and fights until the very end. So I prepared. Because the real twist, the moment that would silence her arrogance forever, was still waiting to be revealed. If you were sitting in that courtroom, hearing a child choose between his mother and his grandmother, what would you feel? The turning point, preparing in silence. After that first hearing, nights became my battleground. I sat at the kitchen table long after Jacob fell asleep, surrounded by stacks of papers, receipts, and records. Each crumpled bill, each faded school report carried my signature, proof that I had been more than a stand-in. I had been mother, father, protector, and provider. Mrs. Patterson, my quiet ally, sat across from me many evenings, her reading glasses perched low on her nose. "You don't need to shout to win," she said. "The truth is loud enough. We just need to place it in front of the judge the right way." Her words became my anchor. The power of paper. We pieced together a timeline. Medical bills in my name, showing Jacob's doctor visits, antibiotics, even hospital stays when his asthma flared. School forms, every line filled with my handwriting. Parent-teacher meetings, field trips, emergency contacts. Text messages, those sharp little daggers from Caroline. "Stop bothering me. I'm not sending money. Handle it yourself." Evidence doesn't lie, but the most damning piece came not from me, but from Jacob himself. In his quiet, careful scrawl, he had written an essay for school titled, "The Person Who Takes Care of Me." It was about me. Not once did he mention his mother. When Mrs. Patterson read it, her eyes glistened. "This," she said softly, "is the voice the court will hear louder than any lawyer's argument." Caroline's counterattack. Caroline, of course, did not retreat quietly. She arrived at the next visitation in a whirlwind of perfume and disdain. Armed with toys and expensive sneakers, she tossed at Jacob as though love could be bought in boxes. "See, Mom?" she said, flashing me a smile laced with venom. "I can provide better than you ever could." But Jacob didn't run into her arms. He looked at the sneakers, then at me, and simply said, "Thanks, but I already have shoes." That small defiance was a thunderclap. Caroline's smile froze, her eyes narrowing into daggers. Drawing the line. I knew then, the fight was not just about custody, it was about respect. For me, for Jacob, for every sacrifice erased with a shrug. So I drew my line. The next time Caroline called, spitting words like burden and useless, I didn't cry, I didn't beg. I said calmly, "Caroline, this will be the last time you speak to me that way. You may be his biological mother, but in every way that matters, you abandoned him. And if you want to fight in court, then that's where you'll see me." The silence on the other end was thick. Then a hiss. "You'll regret this." But regret had already been my companion for years. I was done carrying it. Jacob's strength. One evening, Jacob sat across from me at the dinner table, his fork pushing peas in small circles. "Grandma," he asked, "why does Mom hate you so much?" I froze, my chest tightening. "She doesn't hate me," I said carefully. "She's lost." Sometimes people confuse freedom with running away. They think love is a chain instead of a gift. He nodded slowly, wiser than his years. "Then I don't want that kind of love." "I just want yours." Those words steadied me. They reminded me that this battle wasn't about revenge. It was about protection, about ensuring that Jacob grew up knowing his worth. The revelation. Then came the document that changed everything. Digging through Caroline's old letters, I found one that had been misdelivered years ago. It was a lease agreement overseas, signed under her partner's name, and attached was a handwritten note in Caroline's unmistakable script. "I won't be sending money home. I can't afford both lives, and I choose this one." There it was, a confession. Not in court, not to me, but in her own words. A choice to abandon her family. Mrs. Patterson nearly smiled. "Do you realize what this means?" She wasn't just absent. She intentionally cut ties. That makes her case weak, fatally weak. For the first time, I felt the scales tip. At the confrontation. The next hearing was different. Caroline strode in, head high, confident. She leaned toward me and whispered, "Enjoy your little moment. The judge will see you're too old. Jacob belongs with me." I turned, steady as stone. "This isn't about belonging. It's about who showed up and you didn't." Her smirk faltered. Just a crack, but enough. When the evidence was presented, the bills, the records, the essay, the note, the courtroom shifted. You could feel it. The weight of truth is undeniable. Caroline's lawyer stammered. She fumed, whispering furiously, her polished nails drumming against the table. And for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. A cliffhanger of justice. The judge leaned back, his gaze moving between us. "This case is not merely about legal rights," he said slowly. "It is about responsibility. Actions speak louder than claims." He announced that the decision would be finalized at the next session. Caroline's face was a mask of rage. As we left the courtroom, she spat, "You think you've won? You're nothing but a bitter old woman. Jacob will hate you for keeping him from me." But Jacob, standing by my side, slipped his hand into mine and whispered, "I don't hate you, Grandma. I love you." And in that whisper, I knew the tide had turned. Reflection. If you were in my shoes, an aging grandmother facing a polished, wealthy daughter in court, would you have had the courage to keep fighting? Or would you have stepped aside, believing her youth and money gave her the upper hand? Sometimes the bravest act is simply to stay standing. The final verdict. The day of reckoning. The final hearing arrived on a crisp spring morning. Sunlight streamed through the tall courthouse windows, but the air was heavy with tension. I sat at the wooden table, hands folded, Jacob beside me. He wore his best shirt, his hair neatly combed, but his eyes darted nervously around the room. Across from us, Caroline entered in a blaze of confidence, heels clicking, hair styled, lips painted crimson. She greeted the judge with a smile that looked rehearsed, then cast me a glance filled with contempt. Her lawyer spoke first, repeating the same tired script. Caroline was the biological mother, financially secure, ready to provide Jacob with opportunities I never could. They painted me as old, frail, a stopgap who had served her time, and then it was our turn. The truth laid bare. Mrs. Patterson rose, steady and calm, her voice carrying the weight of unshakable truth. "Your Honor, this is not a case about who can provide more material comfort. It is a case about who has already provided love, stability, and sacrifice." She laid out the evidence. Medical bills in my name, school records signed by me, messages from Caroline dismissing her responsibilities. Finally, she read aloud Jacob's essay, "The person who takes care of me is my grandma. She is the one who makes me feel safe." The courtroom was silent except for Jacob's small, steady voice as he repeated those words himself, at the judge's request. Caroline's face flushed red. She whispered furiously to her lawyer, but the damage was done. And then came the letter, the one where she confessed to choosing her new life over us. Mrs. Patterson handed it to the judge. His eyes scanned the page slowly, his brow tightening with every line. When he looked up, his gaze was sharp. "Miss Peterson, this letter is in your handwriting?" Caroline stammered. I was under pressure. That doesn't—" But her words faltered. The truth had spoken louder than her excuses. The judge's words. The judge cleared his throat, his voice firm and resonant. "This court recognizes that while biology establishes connection, it is action that establishes parenthood. Mrs. Eleanor Peterson has provided for this child in every way, emotionally, financially, and physically, when his biological mother did not. Therefore, full custody is awarded to Mrs. Peterson. Visitation rights may be considered in the future, provided evidence of consistent effort and responsibility is shown by Ms. Caroline Peterson." The gavel struck. The sound was final. Caroline's collapse. Caroline shot up from her chair, her eyes wild. "You can't do this. He's my son, mine." The bailiff stepped forward, calm but firm. "Ma'am, the decision has been made." She turned on me then, her words like venom. "You think you've won, don't you? You've poisoned him against me." Didn't flinch. My voice was steady, almost gentle. "No, Caroline. You did that yourself. For the first time, I saw the cracks in her armor. The confidence slipped, the fire in her eyes dimmed, replaced by something like fear. Or was it regret? She stormed out, her heels echoing against the marble floor, leaving behind the son she had already lost long before today. Justice, quiet and clear. Jacob squeezed my hand so tightly my fingers ached, but I welcomed the pain. It was real. It was alive. "Grandma," he whispered, "does this mean I get to stay with you forever?" Tears filled my eyes. "Yes, sweetheart. You're home. You're safe." And in that moment, the years of sacrifice, the sleepless nights, the bitter words, they all felt worth it. Because justice had not come through shouting or revenge. It had come through truth, patience, and the quiet endurance of love. A new beginning life after the verdict didn't become magically easy. Bills still needed paying. My back still ached after long nights at the sewing machine. But there was a freedom in knowing that Jacob was mine to raise without the shadow of Caroline's neglect hanging over us. Neighbors celebrated with us. They brought casseroles, hugged Jacob, and told me I had done something extraordinary. But I didn't feel extraordinary. I felt simply relieved that love had been enough. Caroline called once, months later. Her voice was softer, weaker. She asked to see Jacob. I told her, "If you truly want to be in his life, it won't be through money or gifts. It will be through showing up, consistently, respectfully. But until then, don't call again." It wasn't revenge. It was a boundary, one I should have drawn long ago. Reflection and lesson. If you, dear listener, have ever given everything only to be cast aside, know this: your worth is not measured by the gratitude or ingratitude of others. It is measured by the love you give and the strength you show when tested. Respect isn't given by blood. It's earned through love and kindness. Caroline lost not because I outmaneuvered her, but because she chose absence while I chose presence. She abandoned while I endured. And in the end, Jacob chose with his heart, and his heart chose me. closing to the audience. So what about you? If you were in my place, an aging grandmother, battling not just bills but betrayal, would you have fought the way I did? Or would you have let go, believing that time and money spoke louder than sacrifice? Have you ever witnessed such injustice in your own family? Perhaps a sibling favored unfairly, a parent disrespected after years of giving, or a grandchild caught in the middle of conflict. Share your story in the comments. Here in this community, every story is a reminder. No one suffers alone. We speak up together for fairness, dignity, and love. And if this story touched something inside you, if it made you angry, if it made you cry, if it made you breathe a little easier, knowing justice can be found, leave a comment for yourself. A promise, a boundary, a reminder that you, too, deserve respect. Don't forget to subscribe to Quiet Revenge Tales and turn on the bell icon. Here you'll always find stories of sacrifice, betrayal, and those moments when the tables turn at last. Because in the end, justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers through the steady heartbeat of love that refuses to quit.